Chapter 16 to Chapter 21. The shopping went smoothly, and leaving the city was just as easy. After spending the night at a hotel, the three of them checked out early the next morning. They loaded their purchased supplies into a pickup truck and slowly drove out of the city. Due to recent bombings and shootings, road inspections were stricter, with patrol cars already out in the early hours. However, Leon, Wanda, and Sergei, being young and with no issues regarding their identities, were allowed to leave without hassle. After driving about 10 kilometers out of the city, Leon pulled the truck to a stop. In the driver's seat, he tapped the steering wheel and exchanged silent nods with Wanda and Sergei before stepping out of the vehicle. The supplies and equipment they bought were packed in the back. Sergei patted the side of the truck bed and called out, "All right, it's time to get down. This is as far as we can take you." At that moment, the corner of the plastic sheet covering the cargo shifted, and a woman emerged, pointing a pistol at Sergei. Both he and Wanda were momentarily stunned by her appearance. The woman was strikingly beautiful, with delicate features, brown hair, and a figure that radiated confidence. Her mature, alluring presence was enough to capture any man's attention, and Sergei, being only 15, felt his throat go dry. Noticing Wanda's subtle but curious expression, Sergei shivered and quickly coughed to regain his composure. "Look, we don't know who you are, and we don't want any trouble," Sergei said, trying to stay calm. "We've done our part getting you out of the city. This is where we stop." The woman sighed, her tired face still captivating despite her weariness. "I understand, and I'm grateful. But it's not safe yet. We could be caught at any moment. My safe house is still a ways off. I can pay you if you help me get there." Her voice was soft, tinged with exhaustion and a faint rasp, making her seem even more vulnerable. Leon stepped out of the driver's seat. When he saw the woman's face, his expression remained calm, but inside, his thoughts raced. He hadn't expected to meet her here. Calculating the timeline, it made sense. Interesting, he thought. His ears twitched slightly as he scanned the road. Though his eyes couldn't see past the horizon, his heightened perception and hearing had already detected an approaching vehicle. After a brief moment of consideration, he knocked on the car door. "If you need something, get in the car. That includes you," Leon said, addressing the woman. He slid back into the driver's seat, Wanda resumed her place in the passenger seat, and Sergei settled into the back. The woman, still perched in the cargo bed, hesitated. She furrowed her brow, realizing something was off. These three were too calm. They had noticed her presence earlier, yet still allowed her to join them. Even when she pointed a gun at them, none showed fear. Their behavior didn't match their age at all. They were far from ordinary. After a moment's contemplation, trusting in her own abilities and the gun she held, she jumped down from the cargo bed, opened the back door, and got in. With a bang, the engine roared to life, and the pickup continued down the road. Leon glanced at the woman in the backseat through the rearview mirror, his mind still calculating. Her expression remained calm, but beneath the surface, she was on high alert like a rose with thorns. "Beautiful, yet dangerous. Looks like someone's caught up to us, armed and ready." "Don't worry, it's taken care of," Leon muttered casually, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on the door. His words startled the woman. She quickly turned to peer out the rear window but saw nothing. Just as she was about to speak, her eyes widened in shock. Two people had vanished. Sergei, who had been sitting beside her, and Wanda in the passenger seat, were both gone. They had disappeared so silently and swiftly that even her highly trained senses hadn't registered it. Her heart sank. She gripped her pistol tightly, staring at Leon's back. This man was now an enigma full of danger and mystery. Boom! A faint explosion echoed in the distance. The sound was far away, almost imperceptible, but the timing of it sent a chill through her. Recalling Leon's words and the disappearance of the boy and girl, she pieced it together. Lowering her head, she spoke cautiously. "Who are you?" "Generally speaking, I'm not a bad person and have no ill intentions toward you," Leon said, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Bang! Another explosion echoed. The woman, wide-eyed with shock, saw the rear door suddenly swing open. A gust of wind accompanied the return of Wanda and Sergei, who reappeared as if they had never left. Their speed was beyond anything humanly possible. "Are you mutants?" she asked, though her tone revealed she was already certain. Leon chuckled softly and shook his head. "We were just a group of poor souls abandoned by the world." As he spoke, Wanda added softly from the passenger seat, "I read their memories. They're working for a man named Drakov, chasing a defector Natasha Romanoff." The woman's heart sank. Her identity had been uncovered, and her scalp prickled with tension. She wanted to reach for her gun, but instinct told her that doing so would only lead to disaster. "Ha, who's Drakov?" Leon asked, his tone curious. He seemed to direct the question to Wanda, but before she could respond, the woman Natasha answered for herself. "Drakov is the leader of the Red Room, a secret organization that trains children to become elite spies. Only those who survive the brutal training make it out as his most powerful agents, carrying out covert missions for him." "Interesting," Leon replied, already familiar with the story. He asked merely to gauge Natasha's response, the future Avenger, but she didn't flinch. She was sharp, and within 10 seconds, had made up her mind about them. "Wow, spies. Like the ones on TV? Wanda and Sergei asked, clearly fascinated. Natasha, however, was bewildered. Not only were they unafraid after learning about a powerful spy organization, but they also acted so casually. Who are these three people? She wondered. The pickup truck rolled down the road, and Wanda glanced at Natasha through the rearview mirror, noticing her pale face. She opened the glove compartment, pulling out some bread and milk. Eat something. I can tell you're hungry, Wanda said, turning to offer the food. Natasha looked at the bread and milk, then at Wanda's kind, yet sharp face. She pursed her dry lips, whispered a quiet, "Thank you," and accepted the offer. She carefully unwrapped the bread, eating small bites, sipping the milk slowly. This girl was strong and fast, seemingly able to read minds or memories. She was young, 15 or 16, but kind. The man next to her had a body temperature higher than normal, his strength and speed extraordinary. He seemed constantly on guard, his silence masking intense focus. Then there was Leon, the driver, clearly the leader. His presence was calm, his abilities mysterious, with heightened senses that could detect danger from far away. Though young, around 17, his maturity and composure made him seem much older. Natasha continued eating, all the while forming a mental profile of the trio. Surprisingly, they seemed harmless, or at least not hostile toward her. Being with them, for now, didn't feel like a bad thing. It felt safe. Are there many people like you? Wanda asked, hugging her knees in the passenger seat as she looked at Natasha through the mirror. Natasha hesitated, then nodded, a shadow of pain crossing her face as memories of the Red Room resurfaced. The place where countless children her age perished, a brutal training ground where survival meant becoming a merciless machine. She was forged there, her hands stained with blood and sins she could never erase. It turns out you're just like us, Wanda remarked softly. Wanda's expression softened considerably. She glanced at Leon, as if wanting to say something but holding back. Leon noticed her hesitation from the corner of his eye and could already guess what this kind-hearted girl was thinking. Where do you plan to go next? Leon asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Wanda's eyes lit up at the question, and Sergei raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Me, I don't know, Natasha replied, her expression darkening. Dracov's power was vast, stretching across Europe. She had no idea what her fate would be, whether she'd die in some dark corner or be assassinated by his forces. The cost of freedom had left her feeling like there was no place for her in the world. In that case, maybe I can offer you a place to stay, Leon said casually. Natasha's body tensed at his words. She looked at Leon, who kept his eyes on the road. One hand gripped the steering wheel, while his other arm rested on the car door, his chin propped on his fist, as if what he said was of little consequence. Her heart, once cold and stagnant, stirred slightly. She felt a flicker of hope but also a wave of caution. Do you trust me so easily after such a short time? She asked, her voice laced with doubt. It's not that I trust you, I trust Wanda, Leon replied without looking back, his tone a mix of seriousness and playfulness. If you had any ill intentions, she'd see right through you. Then, in a quieter tone, added, besides, your story is much like ours, a group of people abandoned by the world, just trying to survive. Natasha fell silent for a moment before her lips moved slightly. Dracov's power is vast, she said, the implication clear. But both Wanda and Sergei showed no signs of concern. Their body language and expressions conveyed indifference, as if Dracov's power didn't intimidate them in the slightest. After all, Baron Strucker had been no match for them. Leon could infiltrate and destroy Strucker's bases all by himself. If it weren't for the self-destruct systems, Wanda and Sergei could have easily breached them too. This is nothing, Leon shrugged casually, his confidence palpable. Natasha hesitated. She felt like a lioness lost in the jungle, desperate to find a place of safety. She studied Leon's profile as he drove, his calm demeanor adding to her uncertainty. After a moment, she made her decision. If you're truly that confident, time will tell, Leon replied with a smile, inwardly satisfied that he had won over the infamous Black Widow. While Natasha might not match Leon's raw power, her skills as one of the world's top spies made her invaluable. Her experience and abilities were assets Leon could certainly use. Wanda, too, seemed to feel a deep empathy toward Natasha, and that connection alone made her presence worthwhile. Besides, strength could always be built. With a training method like the breathing technique, Natasha could be completely transformed. As usual, the car stopped in the same spot. To Natasha's amazement, she watched as Leon, Wanda, and Sergei each casually lifted a metal box with one hand. There might be some bumps ahead, so it's best to be prepared, Wanda said kindly. Before Natasha could question what she meant, she saw a flash of red light in Wanda's eyes. The powerful red energy wrapped around her, and before she could react, a tremendous force pushed her forward. Boom! The air exploded as the three figures shot through it, crossing the road at nearly subsonic speed toward the Ural Mountains. Natasha, lifted by Wanda's chaos magic, saw the trees blur past at an alarming rate against the fierce wind. Even in the dense jungle of the Ural Mountains, their speed remained unchanged. They wove effortlessly between the trees for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, they leapt tens of meters into the air before landing smoothly on the ground. Natasha's heart raced, almost leaping out of her chest. On the wide clearing near the wooden house, the three landed gracefully, and the box they carried, containing delicate equipment and glass products, remained perfectly steady. Natasha felt a bit disoriented, with sweat on her forehead and her chest heaving. The near supersonic flight was intense, but Wanda's chaotic energy shielded her from the worst of the wind pressure. Despite the jarring experience, Natasha's heartbeat gradually returned to normal. She heard Wanda's voice. Pietro and the others are still practicing at the waterfall. Natasha, come inside quickly. This will be your new home. Wanda and the others carried the boxes into the wooden house, which resembled a villa. Natasha looked around and observed that it was a standard two-story wooden structure, spacious and sturdy. The solid foundation made it resilient to earthquakes or other disturbances, and it was nestled among towering trees, providing natural camouflage. From her quick calculations, Natasha determined that they were on a mountainside in the Ural Mountains. The treacherous road and remote location meant it was virtually undetectable by military satellites. Only an extensive drone search could reveal this place. She couldn't help but admire Leon and his team for their thoughtfulness and maturity despite their youth. They ascended the wooden stairs and entered the house. Inside, the decor was warm and inviting. The large living room was decorated to feel like home, complete with a family portrait on the wall featuring 15 children, all smiling joyfully despite their young age. Leon was busy at the bar, squeezing juice and preparing 4 large cups. He placed the drinks and plates on the wooden table in front of the sofa. Don't be shy, Natasha. Welcome to join us. We have a lot to talk about, he said with a friendly smile. Wanda and Sergei went upstairs to change clothes. Meanwhile, Leon sat on the sofa and greeted Natasha, who was admiring the family photo. Natasha turned around, sat on the sofa not far from Leon, and thanked him for the juice. Who are you? She asked, directly addressing the biggest question on her mind. From her experience, Leon's actions suggested he was hiding something. Despite her suspicion, Leon didn't hesitate to be open. For someone as guarded as Natasha, sincerity was often the best way to break through. Leon shared his story in detail, how he had rescued Wanda and other children from an experimental base, the challenges he faced in building a new life in the Ural Mountains, and his 2 years of hibernation to strengthen himself. He also spoke of his plans for revenge against Baron Strucker. As Leon spoke calmly, Natasha's feelings shifted. She could hardly fathom how a group of children could escape from such a dark situation, let alone survive and thrive under Leon's care. Recalling Wanda's words, "You are just like us," Natasha looked at Leon with admiration and respect. She realized that this young man, through his strength and careful planning, had pulled desperate and numb children from the depths of hell and given them a new life. As Leon was speaking, footsteps approached from the stairs. Wanda and Sergei had changed into long-sleeved sweaters and slippers and joined Leon and Natasha on the sofa. Wanda narrowed her eyes with a sweet smile, took a sip of the juice, and then leaned back comfortably on the sofa. Sergei, who had previously been tense, appeared more relaxed now. Natasha noted that despite his earlier stiffness, Sergei was quite muscular, and his demeanor had softened significantly. Could it be because of this home? It's really beautiful, Natasha said softly, her autumn-colored eyes reflecting a hint of sadness. She remembered a time when she, too, had such a warm and comforting home. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps came from outside the door. Natasha's muscles instinctively tensed, but she quickly noticed how relaxed the 3 of them were. Realizing there was no threat, she let herself relax as well. "Hey, Boss Leon, Wanda, Sergei, you're back," someone called out. "Brother Leon, Sister Wanda, Brother Sergei," echoed another voice. Figures began to appear at the doorway, revealing Pietro and the others who had been training by the waterfall. 2 10-year-old children cheered excitedly and, with their short legs, sprinted into the arms of Leon and Wanda, brimming with joy. They kept rubbing their wet heads against their neck. Leon and Wanda didn't seem to mind, and gently patted the little ones on their heads. "How was your practice today?" Leon asked. "Great, I'm getting stronger again," one of the kids exclaimed. "Very good, go take a shower. We'll be making dinner later. Wanda also bought you a lot of snacks." "Thank you, Sister Wanda," they chimed. The younger ones beamed with excitement, and 2 little girls even gave Wanda a kiss on the cheek. The older children glanced curiously at Natasha, sitting on the sofa, unsure of why this beautiful woman was there. Still, they all made their way upstairs for a shower. "They're really happy," Natasha remarked, feeling more at ease seeing how warmly and closely the family interacted. "Isn't that what families are for?" Leon responded, standing up. "I bet you're hungry too. Want to help us prepare dinner? After all, you're part of this now." "Good," Natasha replied, feeling the warmth of inclusion. This boy's intuition is as clear and delicate as water, she thought. Natasha understood what Leon was implying but didn't refuse. However, as she looked around, it suddenly dawned on her that preparing a meal for this large family was no small task. They were pulling out dozens of kilograms of chopped beef and lamb from the fridge, along with a massive box of seafood, not to mention all the vegetables. No wonder there were 5 or 6 people working in the open kitchen, using a large boiler for cooking. Natasha estimated the food consumption and realized that each person was eating 4 to 5 times the amount of a typical adult. Did they have monster-sized appetites? As dinner preparations went on, the rest of the family, having finished their showers, joined in. Everyone knew their role. Some chopped vegetables, others cooked, washed, or set the table. The routine was well practiced, and the teamwork seamless. Throughout the process, the children were curious about Natasha, intrigued by this mature, beautiful woman. Taking the opportunity, Leon shared her story, explaining how they had met. Hearing about her similar experiences, the children, still so kind despite their struggles, quickly warmed to Natasha. Their acceptance touched her deeply. It wasn't easy for a spy like Natasha, who rarely opened up, to feel such warmth. But seeing these children, who had been through so much darkness and despair, still hold on to their innocence and kindness, made her feel something she hadn't in a long time. And for the first time, she gained a deeper understanding of Leon. Only kind-hearted people would work so hard to give these children the same sense of quality in life. The meal took a full hour to prepare, but it was a shared effort. Each time the food they helped make appeared on the table, everyone felt a sense of accomplishment. Naturally, their appetites grew with that satisfaction. The large round table was full, everyone leaning on each other's shoulders while enjoying the delicious food. Night had fallen outside, but inside the wooden house, there was only the sound of laughter and cheerful voices. Natasha sat beside Wanda, eating and answering the curious questions of the children. Their inquisitive yet innocent eyes slowly made her drop her guard without even realizing it. This place was truly beautiful, far removed from the complications of the outside world. There was no need for constant vigilance, no fear of sniper rifles or sudden attacks while you slept. Here, there were only smiles and the pure, hearty laughter of children, like a clear spring washing away all her worries. Natasha found herself really liking this place. It wasn't just because of Leon and the others' strength, but because it was a safe and warm haven. After dinner, everyone helped wash the dishes. Once the cleaning was done, the group scattered. Some watched TV, some played games. There was laughter from those who won and grumbling from those who lost. Meanwhile, a few of the children were especially curious about Natasha. 2 of the 10-year-olds, in particular, couldn't get enough of her, convinced that this beautiful sister liked them very much. Although the 2 younger kids were the favorites, Natasha soon became the center of attention. She was pulled into playing games, watching TV, discussing plot twists, and was even offered the kids' favorite snacks. Leon watched with a smile. Seeing Natasha relax and laugh sincerely, he knew that his family had grown stronger. In this world, having a place to belong, bonds to care about, it wasn't a bad thing. At least now, he had something to fight for, reasons to survive, his brothers and sisters. Anyone who threatened them would face hell. The nearest threat was Hydra, but on the horizon was Thanos. Leon made a mental note: he would have to take down Thanos first. Who in their right mind tries to enforce family planning on the entire universe? Thanos was truly deranged. This world, for all its sins, was still beautiful. Better than being wiped out by random chance. Leon had raised a group of siblings with monster-level strength. He'd have to give them something or someone to focus their energy on when they got bored. And really, what's so wrong about robbing the rich to give to the poor? At night, on the side of the Ural highway, a man in a blue jacket and peaked cap stood silently. In front of him were 2 wrecked Humvees. The scene was shocking, even for someone like him, who had seen a lot. One of the vehicles had been sliced clean in half by something sharp, and the occupants inside had their necks slashed, their veins opened. It was a relatively quick death, compared to the other car. The second vehicle was crushed beyond recognition by some immense force. The resulting explosion had turned it into a charred metal shell, filled with twisted remains and blood splatter. Clint Barton, wearing special night vision sunglasses, captured the scene and uploaded the footage through the micro monitor on his glasses frame. His expression was grim. Clint, an ace agent from a mysterious organization, was in Russia on an assassination mission. His target, a notorious female spy, Black Widow. She had killed numerous high-profile political figures over the years, even affecting the organization behind his mission. However, upon entering the country, he discovered that Black Widow had defected and was now being hunted. After tracking her to this location, the trail went cold. He glanced at the road. Too many overlapping tire marks made a proper investigation near impossible. His organization didn't have enough influence in Russia to dig deeper. After a moment of silence, Clint got into his car and left the scene, heading back to his rental apartment in the nearby city of Perm. Upon arrival, he carefully checked the surroundings in his apartment for any signs of surveillance. Once he confirmed it was clear, he took out his communicator. It wasn't long before the device connected. A deep voice spoke from the other end. "Clint, sir, someone rescued the target. She's disappeared without a trace. Any leads?" "Based on the clues I traced, someone like me was chasing the target," Clint said, his voice steady. "There was a shootout at the Perm City Drama Theater, and they fled. They left Perm sometime between early morning and noon. The team of killers that were after them found dead more than 10 kilometers away on the roadside." The other end of the line was silent for a few seconds. "Is there another force involved?" Clint nodded, though the person couldn't see him. "It's not ordinary people. The information's been uploaded. The methods used were unconventional. There was the sound of rapid typing on the other end. After a few seconds, the voice returned, sounding intrigued. Mutants, perhaps. Judging by the scene, that seems likely, Clint replied. Continue the investigation. I'll activate the agents in your area to assist. Understood, sir. Clint ended the communication, violently ripping the device apart and tossing the pieces into a garbage bag. He moved to the living room, sitting down on the sofa. Spread across the table was a topographic map of the surrounding area. He marked locations with a pen perm city, the starting point, and followed the kilometer markers to nearby towns, deep in thought. Was this an accident, or was it all part of a plan? He murmured to himself. Early the next morning, rain tapped lightly on the window, blending with the soft chirping of birds from the nearby jungle. Despite the tension in Clint's mind, the sounds outside created an oddly peaceful harmony. In the room, Natasha lay on the soft, warm quilt. Her eyelids fluttered before she slowly opened her eyes. Her light green pupils appeared. Confused at first, but in the next moment, they sharpened as her instincts kicked in. She reached for the pillow, her muscles tense, then she relaxed, realizing there was no danger. Sitting up in bed, the quilt slipped off her figure as she leaned against the headboard, her gaze drifting toward the window. The lush jungle outside, glistening in the rainy season, was a serene sight. From below, the sound of laughter and play reached her ears, and a soft smile curled on her lips. Tap, tap, tap. There was a knock on the door. Natasha raised an eyebrow, slipping into her cotton shoes and walking to the door. Opening it, she found Wanda standing there with a sweet smile. Good morning, Natasha, Wanda greeted cheerfully. Good morning, Natasha replied. It looks like you slept well, Wanda noted, observing how much better Natasha looked, the tiredness from before almost gone. She handed Natasha a bundle of clothes. I figured you didn't have anything to change into. You can borrow mine. It might be a bit tight, though. Wanda gave her a playful, slightly resentful glance, noting the difference in their figures. They were similar in height, but Wanda's hips and chest were smaller, a detail that made her a bit self-conscious. Still, she reminded herself she was still growing, so there was no rush to worry. Natasha, amused by Wanda's expression, accepted the clothes with a smile. Thank you. Wanda shrugged. Breakfast is almost ready. You can come down and eat after washing up. Also, I've got something good to teach you today. I'm looking forward to it, Natasha replied, her curiosity piqued. After Wanda left, Natasha changed into the clothes. They were a bit snug, as expected, but nothing she couldn't handle. Once she was ready and had freshened up, she made her way downstairs. By the time she arrived, everyone was already up and had even done their warm-up exercises before breakfast. Natasha saw her place set at the dining table. Hey, Natasha, good morning. A few greeted. Good morning, Sister Natasha. Chimed in the younger ones. Natasha smiled and returned each greeting warmly. Wanda waved, motioning for her to sit next to her. As Natasha took her seat, Leon brought out the last dish. With Leon leading the way, everyone began their breakfast. Seeing how eagerly the group ate gave Natasha a good appetite as well. It was rare for her, but she ended up having a full breakfast alongside them. Afterward, they all helped clean up the dishes, chatting as they went. Once the kitchen was tidy, everyone had a little free time. Some watched TV, some played games, and others headed out for a bit of fresh air. Leon went straight outside and left. Watching him head toward the back of the mountain, Natasha sat on the sofa with little Alina in her arms. Curious, she turned to Wanda, who was happily sipping hot milk while leaning on the sofa. Wanda, where's Leon going so early in the morning? Natasha asked. Him, he's off to practice, Wanda replied. Practice? Natasha raised an eyebrow. Wanda nodded. All of us need to practice. It's the foundation for how we survive in this world. You'll need to, too. Me. Natasha's eyes lit up with curiosity and anticipation. By the waterfall, rain was still falling lightly from the sky. The ground was slightly muddy, but neither Natasha nor Wanda seemed to care. In fact, Natasha was excited. She was about to learn a breathing technique from Wanda. As the name suggests, the breathing method uses a specific rhythm of breathing to absorb large amounts of oxygen, infusing it into your cells, and strengthening the heart, lungs, and overall physical fitness, Wanda explained. She was dressed casually in a gray sweatshirt and sweatpants, looking young and full of energy. This method comes from Leon, specifically the sun breathing technique. Wanda gestured for Natasha to look across the river. Natasha turned her gaze and saw children on the other side training intensely. Sergei, along with Alina, who was only 10, were lifting heavy metal plates, bench pressing, and stretching. What caught Natasha's attention was that they all seemed to be breathing in a particular rhythm as they trained. The sheer intensity of their workouts, far exceeding what even adult athletes might endure, left Natasha amazed. Incredible, Natasha remarked, fully understanding the significance of what she was witnessing. With her experience, she knew that mastering such a breathing technique could accelerate physical growth to extraordinary levels. After years of this training, these kids would surpass human limits in strength and endurance. She also realized how dangerous this knowledge could be in the wrong hands. If any organization or nation discovered this technique, it could trigger a major upheaval. Now it made sense why Leon remained so cautious, keeping a low profile despite his immense power. It truly is incredible, Wanda agreed, her words carrying a deeper meaning. The technique didn't just change their physical capabilities, it also gave them mental confidence. Sun breathing is the origin and foundation of all breathing techniques, Wanda explained, but it carries the intense power of the sun, making it too overwhelming for anyone but Leon to handle. So, through him, we developed new methods based on sun breathing, opening up a whole new world. Everyone now has their own unique breathing style. She smiled at Natasha. You'll find a breathing method that suits you too. Wanda's explanation was thorough, and Natasha listened closely. Wanda was curious to see what kind of breathing technique Natasha would discover. Would she adapt an existing method or create something entirely new? Given Natasha's background as a spy, she was already in peak physical and mental condition. Breathing itself wouldn't be an issue for her, but finding the right rhythm was another story. Natasha spent the entire day trying to master the breathing rhythm. It wasn't easy, but fortunately, she wasn't pressed for time. In this secluded place, she had all the time she needed to explore and learn. As night began to fall, Natasha finally opened her eyes, emerging from her deep focus on the breathing technique. Wanda had finished her own practice as well, a few beads of sweat still clinging to her forehead. Let's head back and prepare dinner, Wanda said, calling everyone to wrap up for the day. Natasha watched in amazement as a group of people on the other side of the river finished their workout. Pietro zipped around with lightning speed, while others casually leapt across the river, covering dozens of meters with ease. Even the youngest, who were no more than 10 years old. The sheer power and agility on display made her blink in disbelief. Okay, she thought, a bunch of little superhumans, better get used to it. Meanwhile, deep in the Ural Mountains, in an area with a narrow waterfall, Leon stood by a flat pool of water. The air was thick with mist, and the ground was muddy from the humidity. Wearing just a vest, his body glistened with sweat as he lifted a massive stone weighing 20 or 30 tons. His muscles, chiseled and defined like a sculpture, flexed under the strain, but his breathing remained steady and controlled. As night began to fall, Leon tossed the enormous stone aside with a heavy thud, causing the ground to tremble as it sank slightly into the earth. He stood tall in front of the stone, twisting his neck until it cracked audibly. Leon raised his arm, and a dark, shimmering aura quickly enveloped it. He spoke to himself quietly, assessing his progress. With the breathing technique and the power of the glint fruit, my physical strength has skyrocketed, but my growth has slowed down. I need to focus on refining the glint fruit and mastering the 3 forms of Haki. He clenched his fist, determined. I've built a solid foundation. Now, my goal is to awaken the fruit's true potential and reach the peak of the 3 Hakis. Once I achieve my goal, there won't be many on Earth who can stop me. 2 years from now will mark the beginning of my journey. In 2 years, no matter what Leon gains, it will be the start of his declaration to the world that his era has arrived. With Wanda and the others by his side, the days of being a lone wolf are behind him. His ambitions extend far beyond Earth. The path of the strong is endless, and his ultimate targets are cosmic entities like Death, Eternity, and Galactus. Though they seem distant, Leon is determined to strive for them. He wants to grow alongside Wanda and the others on this journey. As he moves forward, he's inclined to build a force of his own, perhaps even creating his own divine kingdom, like Asgard. For Leon, hard work and enjoyment aren't mutually exclusive. He relishes the strength gained from training, but when tired, he's just as willing to indulge in the beauty of the world. He doesn't care if people call him vulgar. He didn't work this hard just for the sake of asceticism. He wants freedom, wealth, beautiful women, and everything life has to offer. Being an ascetic when you have the means to enjoy life. That's madness. With a soft exhale, Leon's body shimmered with a dazzling golden light that burst into a cross-shaped star, and his figure disappeared into the night. Chapter 5 Chapter 22 to Chapter 28 In the wooden house, everyone was busy preparing dinner, but Leon was nowhere to be found. Natasha, kneading dough alongside Wanda, couldn't help but ask, "Where's Leon?" Wanda, playfully shaping the dough in her hands, smiled and replied, "When Leon trains, he usually comes back later than us. He often goes deep into the Ural Mountains. It's a quiet place, surrounded by nature. Like meditation." Natasha mused, intrigued. "Maybe," Wanda shrugged. "When he trains, he empties his mind and tries to blend into the natural environment, almost like he's trying to understand everything around him. It's a bit beyond me, to be honest." As Wanda spoke, she seemed to sense something and glanced toward the door of the wooden house. Natasha, curious, followed her gaze. In the next moment, she saw golden particles gather and form into a human-shaped Leon, now standing there in a vest. The display of this ability left Natasha momentarily stunned. Is that the ability he mentioned, the one he got from the experiments? Natasha asked, still processing what she had just seen. Wanda chuckled at her reaction. Leon can control light and turn into it. Natasha's mind raced. The power to manipulate light could be deceptively simple or incredibly destructive, depending on how it was used. If it was used correctly, Leon could easily become a walking nuclear bomb. Natasha's image of Leon became a bit clearer in her mind. His strength brought her a sense of security. After all, as the backbone of their group, the stronger Leon was, the safer she felt. It also made sense why Leon, Wanda, and the others were so dismissive of Dreykov. With abilities like his, numbers and weapons seemed insignificant. That evening, after dinner, something was different. Under Leon's guidance, Natasha began teaching the group. As one of the world's top spies, she brought a wealth of experience in assassination, languages, culture, communication, and human psychology. Her expertise in micro-expression analysis and reading emotions was at an expert level. She could easily be a professor. Her teachings helped fill gaps in the children's knowledge and experience. Leon, with his understanding of how important knowledge is, knew this was a key part of their growth. The belief that knowledge is power stuck with Leon, something reinforced by figures like Tony Stark. In his spare time, Leon even dabbled in martial arts, experimenting to see how he could apply it to his glint fruit ability. After all, what boy hasn't dreamed of being like Frieza, using a single finger to release an energy ball and destroy an entire planet? Leon had definitely dreamed about it. Leon had also often wondered why the children, including Wanda, never seemed to feel bored or restless living in the remote mountains. The answer was simple. They were constantly enriched with knowledge, training, and purpose. In 2008, time moved slowly, but much had changed over the course of a year. In the United States, the cultural hub and global superpower, public opinion began to turn sharply against mutants. A series of attacks and incidents had worsened their living conditions, making survival increasingly difficult. The situation escalated even further after Magneto, the leader of the mutant supremacy movement, disappeared without a trace. His absence only fueled public fear, causing the anti-mutant sentiment to grow more intense. Conspiracies targeting mutants were popping up everywhere, making it a hostile world for them to navigate. In addition to the turmoil in the United States, Eastern Europe had remained relatively stable. Leon and his family, still in their dormant phase, watched events unfold from a distance, feeling sympathy for the plight of mutants but knowing there was little they could do. However, that year brought an unexpected change that disrupted their peaceful life. It happened one day in the Ural Mountains. A fierce blizzard hit the region, covering the entire mountain range and nearby cities in a thick blanket of snow. Inside their wooden house, the warmth of the fireplace kept the cold at bay. Wanda, now a year older, sat on the sofa with a tablet in hand, studying new college-level material. Thanks to her enhanced physical and mental abilities, learning had become easier. Her memory and focus, sharpened through training and inspired by Natasha's spy techniques, allowed her to absorb knowledge quickly. She wasn't just learning, she was mastering it at a remarkable pace. Perhaps due to her mastery of water breathing, Wanda had become as clear and calm as water itself. She had also developed a habit of patience, finding joy in what others might consider the tedious process of learning. In the room, everyone else was also engrossed in their studies, using tablets and headphones. These children, having risen from the depths of hardship, were mentally strong and mature. They all understood that both power and knowledge were crucial for their future. The atmosphere in the wooden house was peaceful and focused. Leon, too, was engaged, holding 2 orphan sables he had found in the mountains. While cradling them, he glanced at his laptop, sifting through the latest reports from the outside world. Being informed doesn't mean being cut off from the world. Natasha excels at this. She walked in from the kitchen carrying a dinner plate with oat milk that she had soaked. Over the past year, Natasha had become an integral part of the family, playing the role of an older sister. "Thank you, Sister Natasha," Wanda said with a smile. "Thanks," others chimed in as well. After handing out the oat milk and receiving their thanks, Natasha placed the dinner plate on the wooden table and moved it toward Leon. Her gray down sweater did little to hide her figure, but a year of practice had made her demeanor more gentle and less captivating. "How are things looking? Aside from the public criticism of mutants, there haven't been many major events. The only thing causing some buzz is the US military's secret pursuit of a big green monster. The hacker groups in the US, who claim to have the truth, are our primary source of external information. There's never a shortage of people like that." "True, but it's frustrating that Hydra has stayed so well hidden and even changed their plans over the past year. Leon is quite dissatisfied about it. There's no place to gather intel." "Well, at least there's no shortage of gangster drug gangs. Otherwise, how would he continue to fund such a large family?" Natasha's red lips curved into a slight smile as she sighed. "I never expected that Hydra, which I thought was gone, actually still exists." Hydra, a terrifying organization from World War II, was thought to have vanished into history. Yet, to Natasha's surprise, it remained hidden in the world. However, after practicing the breathing technique, armament hockey, and observation hockey and witnessing the destruction Leon casually caused during his training, her concern about Hydra began to fade. Natasha believed that if Leon truly dedicated his time and energy, wiping out organizations like Hydra wouldn't be much of a challenge for him. The ability to control light was truly terrifying. Natasha couldn't help but feel a deep sense of security around Leon. She glanced at him subtly, his calm demeanor somehow reassuring, and her eyes flickered with unspoken thoughts. Leon, seemingly oblivious to Natasha's quiet observation, remained focused on some secrets revealed by a so-called truth-owning hacker group. But suddenly, an immense spiritual energy surged through the air, so vast that time and space seemed to freeze for an instant. The energy was hidden, swift, and almost impossible to detect except for Leon. His heightened senses, honed by 2 years of practicing observation hockey, caught it immediately. He shot to his feet, startling the 2 small sables resting on him, who yelped in protest as they tumbled off. Leon, however, ignored them, his gaze fixed on the ceiling, eyes glinting with alertness. Wanda's expression shifted too, clearly sensing the disturbance. Leon's sudden reaction caught the attention of everyone else. Natasha, Sergei, and the others removed their headphones, standing up to look at him in confusion. They had rarely seen Leon so unsettled. Only Wanda, leaning on the sofa, had a knowing look, her eyes glowing faintly with red energy. "Leon," Natasha called out, testing the waters. Leon lowered his gaze slightly, his brow furrowed in surprise and uncertainty. Something unusual had just happened, and he wasn't sure what it was yet. That's what it was. Just now, a huge spiritual force swept through, Leon explained briefly before noticing something off with Wanda. He walked over to her, squatting down in front of her. With everyone's concerned eyes on him, he looked directly into her eyes and softly asked, "Wanda, what did you see?" Wanda took a deep breath, her face pale, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. "I saw fragments of a scene," she began. "What scene?" Leon pressed gently. "I saw the experiments again, what we went through before. Leon, those children, they were thrown onto the test tables, tortured in the cruelest ways. I couldn't stand to see it." Her voice cracked as she struggled to recall the horrifying vision, her eyes welling up with tears. The memory struck close to home for her, Leon, and the others. It was a haunting reminder of their past, but what she saw seemed even worse. Pietro, who had been standing by, knelt next to Wanda, taking her hand in his to comfort her. Seeing this, the rest of the group gathered around as well. Alina and the 2 little ones climbed onto the sofa, leaning against Wanda silently, offering their wordless support. Natasha, watching this unfold, felt her heart ache. She had grown close to Wanda and the children over the past year. They were family now. Seeing Wanda like this pained her deeply. Leon frowned, watching Wanda's eyes fill with more unshed tears. He then turned to the others, explaining, "The surge of spiritual energy earlier must have triggered Wanda's chaos magic." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Chaos magic itself stems from a powerful source, with energy beyond comprehension. What Wanda saw could be a connection, something that triggered her magic and spirit, allowing her to glimpse a possible future. Leon's statement wasn't just baseless speculation. In fact, there was only one person he could think of with such immense spiritual power, Professor X. And it would require the use of the Cerebro helmet to amplify it. Given the vision Wanda had of children being subjected to cruel experiments, the source of the image wasn't hard to deduce. Pietro, as Wanda's twin, was less concerned about the mechanics and more focused on her well-being. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. But to his dismay, Wanda didn't respond to him. Instead, she reached out and took Leon's hand. She opened her mouth to speak but hesitated, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Leon held her gaze, understanding the unspoken message in her eyes. "You want to help those kids, don't you?" he asked gently. Wanda nodded. "Yes, we've all been trapped in that abyss of despair, but you were the light that saved us." Her voice faltered, and she couldn't bring herself to continue. She felt selfish for even asking, worried that pushing her feelings would disrupt the peaceful life they had built together. Sensing her inner turmoil, Leon squeezed her hand gently. "Wanda," he said earnestly, "I've told you before, we're a family. What matters to you matters to me." "I know, but," Wanda bit her lip, conflicted. "Listen, you are my family. What I want is for you to be happy. We face everything together, whether it's mountains, tsunamis, or bullets," Leon said softly. "We're always one, and if you want to save those kids, that's the right thing to do." He spoke gently, but his words carried weight. As he motioned around the room, Wanda turned and saw Sergei, Pietro, and Alina looking at her with concerned but determined expressions. "And besides," Leon continued, his voice growing colder, "we shouldn't fear losing our peaceful lives because of a group of villains and scum. It's them who should be afraid. We'll send them to hell in the most ruthless way possible." To him, they were nothing more than trash. Even if the entire world stood against him, Leon wouldn't care. The value of the whole world was virtually non-existent compared to the value of people he loved. If Wanda became depressed or broken, that was a loss far worse than anything. Sergei made a dramatic pose, grinning. "Ha, my cross sword has been itching for action these past few years." "Exactly. Let's take them down," Pietro added. "We can finally get out and do something." Another chimed in eagerly. The chorus of support from everyone warmed Wanda's heart, her eyes misting up from their kindness. She felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. "Then let's get moving. It's time to put what I taught you to use in real combat," Natasha added with a shrug, a small smile on her face. Though they were preparing for departure, there was still a lot of work to do. First, the fragmented images Wanda saw weren't detailed enough to pinpoint the exact location. Fortunately, one image showed the external structure, a lake and a dam. Using her chaos magic, Wanda transmitted the image to Natasha, who sketched it by hand and uploaded it to a database for comparison. After a long search, they finally found the location, Alkali Lake Industrial Area in Canada. Natasha turned her laptop toward Wanda, who examined the image carefully. After a moment, Wanda nodded. This should be the place. Natasha agreed. This is a dam. Structurally, it's perfect for a hidden base isolated from tourists and hard to detect. At this point, Leon stood up. I've booked flight tickets for early morning. We leave in 3 hours. As he turned around, he noticed that everyone had already changed into their gear, holding black bags that were clearly filled with weapons. Natasha, noticing the situation, sighed. Well, getting those through airport security might be tricky. But I know someone who can help smuggle them through. Leon nodded in agreement, then glanced at the youngest members, Alina, Polina, and Pushkin, who were only 11 years old. You three are staying home. What? But it's a family trip. Alina protested, while Polina and Pushkin pouted in disappointment. Leon walked over to the trio, crouched down, and spoke softly. Even though you've practiced the breathing method, you're not strong enough yet. We may be facing mutants or trained soldiers. He gently placed a hand on each of them, adding, your time to shine will come, but you need to be patient. The little ones were definitely not weak. After 3 years of practicing the breathing method, each could easily defeat fully armed soldiers. However, it still wasn't enough. They hadn't yet reached the full concentration needed to maintain their techniques in a normal state. Their proficiency in armament hockey and observation hockey was impressive, but the former required substantial physical strength. Their bodies hadn't fully matured, and despite unlocking some of their potential, they'd struggle against a barrage of bullets, let alone mutants. The three looked into Leon's gentle eyes, hesitated for a moment, and finally nodded in understanding. Then, you have to come back safely. We'll wait for you at home, Alina said, stretching out her little arms to hug Leon. She gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Not to be outdone, the other two quickly followed suit, each giving Leon a kiss. Leon chuckled warmly and ruffled their hair. We'll be back soon, and don't forget, you've got the computer at home. I'll send you a video message. Okay tilde. They chorused. With the three little ones waving goodbye, Leon and the others disappeared into the snowy night. Including Leon and Natasha, there were 13 people in total. Thankfully, they had a large pickup truck that could fit everyone. The strong young men in the back didn't mind braving the wind and snow as they set off. Meanwhile, in Canada, at the Alkali Lake Industrial Area, a dark, damp building resembling an air raid shelter held an ominous atmosphere. Inside, an old bald man in a blue suit, wearing a helmet, sat in a wheelchair, panting heavily. Behind him stood a tall Asian woman in a black leather jacket, helping him remove the helmet. The old man looked utterly exhausted. The woman replaced the helmet with another, this one fitted with thin wires. After completing her task, she nodded to the man standing across from the old man. The man, dressed in a military uniform, looked pleased. He stared at the old man, who struggled to meet his gaze. William, the old man gasped, his voice weak. Oh, awake now, William responded, eyeing him like a predator eyeing its prey. You truly have an incredible power, Professor X. Professor X tried to focus, pointing weakly at his head. This device, it's a suppressor, developed to keep me from entering you. Mind. William smirked, not impressed. Not a bad idea. Your ability to create illusions and control others, even for a short time, is certainly dangerous. But that brainwave amplifier you put on, it let your psychic power spread across the globe in an instant. Unfortunately, it only gave you a brief moment of clarity. Professor X's eyes flicked toward the young man standing next to William. What have you done to him? He's your son. William's expression hardened. Professor X already understood much more than William had intended. No, Charles, my son is dead. William shouted, his voice thick with anger. But a moment later, his expression shifted to a cold, twisted smile. He'll make sure you lose yourself completely. The brainwave amplifier is indeed useful. Once you're fully under its control, you'll return to your school and use your powers to locate every mutant on the planet. William paused, savoring the cruel irony of his plan. And then, you'll kill them with your own hands. With that, he turned away, motioning for the woman to follow him. William, Professor X called out, his voice filled with desperation. But all he got in return was William's cold, indifferent gaze as he left. Oh my God, what should I do? Professor X whispered, staring at the young man in front of him. Despair flashed in his eyes as he realized the gravity of his situation. Yet, in the recesses of his memory, he saw a glimmer of hope, a vision of a special girl, strong and kind, who might make a difference. Meanwhile, in Canada, Leon and Natasha had arrived. Their first stop was a black market dealer, where they bought 2 smuggle pickup trucks and collected the weapons Natasha had secured through her special channels. After a quick breakfast, they gathered Sergei and the others, heading toward Lake Alkali. Snow had fallen heavily across the area, turning the landscape into a winter wonderland, with everything blanketed in silver. The 2 pickup trucks moved slowly along the snow-covered highway. The heavy snowfall made the journey slow and difficult. Leon, who was driving the lead truck, frowned. Isn't this inconvenient with just a car? He muttered. Definitely inconvenient, Natasha quipped from the back seat. A private jet would be better for country hopping, but I doubt that's in your budget. Leon chuckled, thinking about his wallet. Private jets were definitely out of his league for now. But that didn't stop him from dreaming. He thought about the Quinjet used by S.H.I.E.L.D. or Professor X's Blackbird. Both were versatile, global aircraft with radar shielding and optical invisibility, meaning no need for flight clearance. Or better yet, the Ancient One's portal now that would be a handy mode of travel. Leon even considered the possibility of a sign-in system granting him teleportation powers. But given the randomness, there was no telling when that would happen. In the meantime, he'd make do with what he had and focus on what he could control. As they drove, Natasha was busy in the backseat, setting up the communication system. A jack of all trades, Natasha's Technica expertise proved valuable as she ensured everyone's headsets were connected. After about an hour, they were nearing their destination, Lake Alkali. The road was now blanketed in heavy snow, with only the tire tracks from their trucks visible. The surrounding mountains and forests were also draped in snow, making it clear how remote and isolated the area was. Despite the challenging conditions, the landscape was breathtaking. Below the road, a vast river flowed into the lake, with an ancient dam at the far end. It was clear from its dilapidated state that the dam had been abandoned for years. Suddenly, a series of loud bangs echoed through the snowy silence. Bang, bang, bang. The car doors opened and closed in quick succession as Leon and the others stepped out and walked to the edge of the road, peering over the cliff. For some, like Pietro, this was their first mission, and their faces showed clear excitement. After all the intense training they'd undergone, this was their chance to prove themselves not just for survival, but to demonstrate their worth. Leon stood apart, wearing a black windbreaker that flapped in the snowy wind like a dark flame. The cold didn't seem to affect him, nor did it bother anyone else in the group. Natasha, assessing the scene, pointed towards the base of the dam. From the structure, the entrance should be just below the dam, likely through the spillway, she said, gesturing to the closed metal flood discharge channel. Leon nodded and closed his eyes briefly. Wang. His senses sharpened as he activated his heightened awareness, combining his natural abilities with the powerful perception he'd honed through practice. The entire area around the dam appeared in his mind in stark black and white. His perception zoomed in and out, gathering detailed information from below the dam. He heard it all: faint cries, angry voices, hurried footsteps, a torrent of information flooding his mind. It's here, Leon said, opening his eyes. There are a lot of people inside. Natasha nodded, her face grim. Let's begin, Leon continued, his voice calm but resolute. I don't want a single one of those devils walking out of there alive. Anyone who inflicts torture and pain on others knows exactly where they belong. The group responded in unison, their voices chilling. We'll give them hell. Then open the door to hell. Bang. As Leon's command echoed, Sergei, Wanda, Pietro, and the children sprang into action. They burst forward like missiles, cutting through the air with lightning speed and power, heading straight for the dam. Each one moved with the force of an armor-piercing bullet. Leon glanced at Natasha, who gave a casual shrug. Give me a moment, she said before leaping down gracefully, like a swift ocelot. Leon's form shimmered and vanished into a burst of bright particles. Boom. An explosive sound echoed as the massive metal gate of the dam's spillway shattered under an overwhelming force. Wanda's fury unleashed her full chaos magic, tearing through the metal seal in an instant and flinging it aside. The enormous slab crashed into the ground nearby, shaking the earth. The noise reverberated through the base, alerting everyone inside. Machine guns mounted in the spillway blazed, their bullets pouring down like a torrential storm, blanketing the channel. Before anyone else could react, Sumarokov, another powerhouse, took the lead, charging through the barrage with strength that rivaled Sergei's. Sumarokov was only wearing a vest, his muscular arms and broad chest fully visible as he sped ahead. His lips parted slightly, drawing in deep breaths that fueled his powerful body. In a swift motion, he pulled out the twin golden swords strapped to his back, connected by a chain. The swords were a striking sight: red handles, green-edged blades, with red and gold accents. The body of each sword was black, adorned with golden patterns. His heightened senses came alive, his observation hockey expanding, stretching his awareness to its limits. Clang, clang, clang. The swords moved with fluid precision in his hands, deflecting the incoming hail of bullets as if he were painting the air with strokes of ink. Sparks erupted from the metal as the bullets ricocheted off the blades, lighting up the dark passage like fireworks. In a flash, Sergei and the others disappeared down the corridor. As they passed the machine gun nests, Sumarokov's sword sliced through the air in a graceful arc, cutting through the guns effortlessly. They reached the end of the passage, where 8 large cave-like entrances awaited them. Without hesitation, Wanda shouted, "Disperse!" In response, everyone split up, vanishing into the dark caves like shadows. From the initial destruction of the dam's spillway to reaching the end of the channel, less than 3 seconds had passed. It was so fast that the soldiers and guards inside the base hadn't even begun to react. Beep, beep, beep. Alarms blared, chaos erupting throughout the base. The frantic sirens urged the garrison into action. Soldiers scrambled for their weapons, but it was too late. Before they could even react, figures moved towards them at ridiculous speed. Their vision blurred, barely catching a glimpse of their attackers' faces before everything went black and their consciousness faded completely. In the main control room of the base, William Stryker was furious. "You don't even know who's attacking the base. Where are our guards, sir? The attackers might be mutants. Their speed and strength are beyond anything human. Our people are being slaughtered." A subordinate, seated at the monitor, stammered, his voice trembling with fear. He pointed shakily at the screen, which showed the carnage unfolding outside. Even though he was a battle-hardened soldier, he had never witnessed anything like this. From the initial raid to the attack on the base, the efficiency was terrifying. It had taken less than 3 minutes for the intruders to tear through hundreds of soldiers. The firearms were utterly useless. "Damn it," William growled, veins bulging on his forehead as he stared at the screen. The attackers were using nothing but cold weapons, yet their reflexes and speed were far from normal. "Move," William barked, turning to leave for Professor X. His steps faltered as he froze in shock. 2 figures stood in front of him, one tall man in a black windbreaker, the other a woman in a black, tight-fitting combat suit. Before William could react, the woman at his side, sensing danger, extended long, sharp steel claws from her hands. With the agility of a leopard, she lunged at the man. But in the blink of an eye, a foot glowing with golden light slammed into her head. Boom! The force of the kick sent her crashing into the wall, her upper body embedded in the concrete. Her legs twitched uncontrollably as cracks spread across the wall, causing chunks of stone to crumble and fall. The shockwave from the impact ruffled the hair of everyone present. William stood frozen in place, cold sweat dripping down his forehead as his body trembled with fear. Natasha, the one who had entered, was none other than Leon. After swiftly dealing with the woman, he called out softly. Natasha nodded, acknowledging him. With long strides, she walked past William, who stood frozen in fear, not daring to move. As she entered the control room, she effortlessly snapped the necks of a few soldiers before sitting down at the computer to take control. The woman, embedded in the wall from Leon's earlier kick, let out a faint groan as her body trembled, trying to move. Leon glanced at her, his expression indifferent. "Her healing ability is enviable," he remarked casually. He then turned his icy gaze back to William, who stood paralyzed with fear. The cold intensity in Leon's eyes made William feel as though he were staring into the eyes of a predator, ready to tear him apart at any moment. His throat was dry, and he could sense the danger of the man standing before him. Summoning whatever courage he had left, William tried to speak. "I know who you are, but I am a colonel in the US military, and this is my base. What you've done here, shut up, trash." Leon cut him off, his voice as cold as a winter storm. "Tell me, how many lives have you destroyed in your experiments?" William's blood ran cold. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but before he could, Leon's voice cut through the air once more. "Never mind, I already know. People like you are destined for only one place, hell." William could only watch helplessly as Leon stretched out his finger, pointing it directly at him. Wang! A strange sound echoed as a bright, cross-shaped light bloomed from Leon's fingertip. Despite its small size, it contained an overwhelming, terrifying energy. "No, no, you can't kill me," William screamed in desperation, his body trembling as he staggered backward. But it was too late. A brilliant golden beam shot out, and a burning pain pierced his heart. His entire body was instantly consumed by flames. Within the inferno, he could barely make out Leon, who coldly turned away without a second glance. William wailed in agony, reaching out in a futile attempt to grab Leon's back. But the fire overwhelmed him, and he collapsed to his knees, his voice finally silenced. The flames raged on until his body was reduced to ash. Meanwhile, Natasha didn't even spare a look at the fallen William. She was focused on infiltrating the data center. The more she uncovered, the angrier she became. The screens displayed horrific images and data from cruel, inhumane experiments, each one costing lives. It was as if she could hear the screams echoing in her ears. This place was nothing less than a massive slaughterhouse, systematically killing one innocent life after another. Natasha glanced back at the charred corpse behind her. If he were still alive, she would have used her most brutal methods to punish this devil. "You're lucky, you worthless trash," she muttered coldly. In the detention area of the base, a group of imprisoned mutant children trembled in fear, yet hope stirred in their hearts as they listened to the commotion outside. "Is the professor here to save us?" one asked. "It must be. Maybe Teacher Aurora and the others are here too," another child whispered. "Everyone, stay calm and don't cause any trouble for the teachers," a third encouraged, trying to keep everyone's spirits up. Meanwhile, just outside the prison, Wanda, Pietro, and Sergei had found the place. But standing at the door was a man unlike soldiers outside. His combat uniform was unfamiliar, and he wore red quartz glasses that hid his cold, expressionless face. He looked strong. "Ha, I'll take care of this," Pietro began, but before he could finish, Wanda raised her hand. A surge of red, chaotic energy exploded from her, slamming the man into a nearby machine with a heavy crash. Sparks flew as his body twitched among the wreckage of the broken machinery. Pietro blinked, a little stunned. Well, okay, that works. Both Pietro and Sergei stood frozen, staring at Wanda's serious expression. They couldn't help but feel a shiver run down their spines. They were scared. Wanda, unfazed by their reactions, waved her hand again. The chaotic energy ripped through the metal wall, creating an opening. Without a word, she stepped through it with determined strides, leaving them to follow. Wanda stepped into the slightly grimy holding room. Metal barriers lay scattered across the floor, and through the bars, she saw a group of frightened, timid children huddled together. Some were dressed in pajamas, others in ragged clothing. Their fearful expressions and wide eyes reminded Wanda, Pietro, and Sergei of their own past. Just 3 years ago, they had been in a similar state, trapped in despair, numbness, and anxiety, never knowing if death would come at any moment. Wanda's heart ached with pity and regret, almost overwhelming her. Ignoring the filth, she leaned against the partition and looked down at the small, upturned faces. Gently, she spoke, "Hey, little ones, how are you?" A little girl, drawn by Wanda's soft tone and kind face, gathered the courage to ask, "Are you here to save us, sister?" Wanda smiled warmly. "Yes, I'm here to save you. Can you all hide in the corner for me?" The children, obedient and trusting, held hands and shuffled back together, huddling in the corner, clinging to each other. The sight was heartwarming, almost too adorable for Wanda to bear. Smiling, she stood up and summoned her chaotic magic, tearing the metal partition apart with ease. She tossed it aside and reassured the children, telling them not to be afraid. As red energy gently lifted the children to safety, their eyes filled with awe and excitement. Once they were free, Wanda crouched down in front of them, scanning their pale, anxious faces. Seeing their excitement and relief brought her comfort. Just then, Natasha's voice crackled in her ear. "Wanda, I see you." Wanda glanced up at a camera in the corner of the room and nodded. "Are there any other children in custody?" After a brief pause, Natasha replied, "No, that's all the ones who were left." Wanda remained silent for a moment, understanding the painful truth. The children who should have been here alive were already dead. Beside her, Pietro and Sergei said nothing, but the anger in their eyes was unmistakable. Grinding her teeth, Wanda spat out, "These damn monsters." Natasha's voice came through again, calm but bitter. "Exactly. Most of this trash has already gone to hell." Wanda noticed the anxious, questioning eyes of the children. She took a deep breath, calming herself, and focused on the little girl in front of her. "I'll get you all out of here, okay?" The little girl nodded obediently. "Okay." Wanda smiled, gently lifting the girl into her arms and taking a little boy's hand with her other. The rest of the children followed, smiling, as they walked toward the door. Sergei and Pietro stood guard on either side, keeping a protective watch. As they walked, the group of boys glanced up at Sergei and Pietro with eyes full of excitement and admiration. These were the heroes who had saved them. Sergei, especially, caught their attention. His strong, 1.8-meter frame and the cross-shaped sword in his hand stirred the hearts of the boys. To them, he was the embodiment of cool. Sergei noticed the children's gazes and flashed a warm, infectious smile that made everyone feel at ease. The nervous children began to relax, their fears melting away. As they moved through the base, Natasha coordinated everyone's actions via the headphones from the main control room. Before long, they had cleared the entire facility. Everyone regrouped. In the open space, under Natasha's direction, the surrounding corpses were discreetly moved into an unseen corner to prevent the children from witnessing them and experiencing unnecessary psychological trauma. Leon observed Wanda standing nearby, well-behaved and attentive. The children beside her were curious but remained silent, nodding politely. He glanced over at Gennady, Sumarokov, and the others, who were carrying large metal containers filled with liquid adamantium, which would later solidify into metal. As one of the hardest metals in the world, adamantium was valuable but not suitable for making weapons or similar items. At that moment, Natasha emerged from a hidden area and approached Leon, holding up 2 USB drives. "Everything the good and the bad is here," she said, gesturing with the drives. "I've also deleted the data from their systems." "Very good," Leon replied with satisfaction. Everything had gone perfectly. He had even casually killed Stryker's son, a poor soul better off freed from his suffering. As for Professor X, he had simply knocked him out. He didn't want to test whether his Conqueror's Haki could withstand that level of psychic power. Overall, their mission was quite fruitful, and they had looted everything worth taking. "Brother Leon, what should we do with these two?" Sumarokov and Sergei asked as they threw 2 people onto the ground, a man wearing glasses, unconscious, and a woman who had barely survived Leon's powerful kick. Though the woman had healed thanks to her self-regeneration abilities, she glared at the group with fierce eyes, yet made no move to attack. Leon ignored the unconscious man and approached the woman, his gaze sharp and commanding, like an eagle's. "What's your name?" he asked. My name is Yuriko Oyama. I don't remember much else," the woman replied, her cold arrogance now gone. Her eyes, once filled with anger, softened as she spoke in a low voice. "She's one of Stryker's successful experiments," Natasha explained after checking the base's database. "She's been under drug control for a long time, which could explain her memory loss." Leon nodded, but said nothing at first, lost in thought as he considered how to deal with Yuriko. Sensing that Leon was weighing his decision, Yuriko quickly spoke up. I want to follow you. Her words took Leon and the others by surprise. He raised an eyebrow, studying her closely. Yuriko met his gaze with resolve. I've forgotten my past, and I don't want to die. I want to follow you, I can be your slave, she said firmly. If it had been anyone else, Yuriko would have fled without hesitation. But Leon was different. She sensed his overwhelming power, and, knowing she couldn't escape, her choice was clear, she would surrender to him willingly. Leon studied the woman before him, who seemed more like a beast than a human. He could see the truth in her heart. She had been isolated from the world for too long, and her altered genes meant she was no longer fully human, destined to live as a beast. A beast, when freed from its restraints, eventually goes mad. She needed something to keep her tethered, and Leon was the one holding the tether. He nodded. All right, from now on, you'll follow me. With that, Leon now had a female version of Wolverine at his side, and she didn't look half bad, either. What about this guy? Pietro asked, nudging the unconscious man at his feet. That's Scott. He's not a bad guy, one of the little boys whispered timidly. Ah, I see, Pietro responded, his tone a bit sharp. So, the teachers and professors were all captured. Looks like this military colonel was pretty tough. Pietro didn't know Scott personally, but he had heard of the famous mutant Professor X. Even so, the colonel couldn't have anticipated that such a powerful group would launch a sudden raid on the base. He was captured before he even had a chance to react. A defeat that, in Pietro's eyes, was simply bad luck. At that moment, Natasha spoke up. They'll be here in about an hour at most. We need to leave. She was referring to the X-Men from the Mutant Academy. With their students, teachers, and professors taken captive, there was no way the X-Men would sit idly by. Natasha had sent a signal to the Academy, but it had been intercepted immediately. The base's network had been breached, meaning the X-Men were likely on their way. Given the speed of their Blackbird fighter, they would arrive soon. Leon turned to the group of children and spoke softly, your teachers are coming fast. Just wait here for a little while, okay? Okay. The children responded in unison, nodding their heads obediently. Leon smiled gently. He wasn't ready to face the X-Men directly yet. The outcome of this situation still needed time to unfold, and according to his plans, there would be much to gain in the future. Well then, goodbye, little ones, Leon said, standing up and nodding to the others as he turned to leave. But just as he took a step, a little girl suddenly ran over with her tiny legs and clung to Wanda's leg. Sister, I want to go with you, she said. The girl's bold move surprised everyone. Leon stopped and looked at the small, Asian girl. Are you not a student at the Mutant Academy? He asked. I'm not. I was captured and brought here, the girl whispered, gathering her courage. What's your name? Leon asked. My name is Clarice Ferguson. You seem to be Asian. I don't know. I've been called this name since I was little. Leon knelt down next to Wanda, looking directly into the little girl's eyes. Are you sure you want to come with us? He asked seriously. Clarice nodded her head, her small face full of determination, as if she were making the most important decision of her life. Leon smiled at her earnestness. Then follow us, Leon said, gently patting the little girl's head before standing up and turning to leave. Wanda took the girl's hand, walking closely behind him. The group of children left behind watched with longing eyes as their saviors slowly disappeared into the flood channel. An hour later, in the distant sky near the dam, a black fighter jet descended through the snowy clouds, landing on a flat expanse that obscured the view. The plane door opened, and as the metal stairs extended to the ground, a group of people in various combat uniforms stepped out. Leading them was a tall, muscular man with a beard. He glanced back at a few younger people in the group and spoke in a low, firm voice, you all stay on the plane. But we can help with the mission. One young man protested, his voice filled with frustration. The others beside him, both men and women, shared his sentiment. The bearded man pointed a finger at him, his tone stern. Listen bub, this isn't a game, this is war. You're not experienced enough to be part of this fight. Teacher, the young man muttered, still dissatisfied. He turned to a woman with burgundy hair, hoping for her support. Her beautiful face remained serious as she said, John, Logan's right. You're not X-Men yet. You're not ready to fight. Stay here and wait for us. Okay, John, the young man, was clearly dissatisfied, but he had no choice but to accept it. An old man carrying a brown helmet and with a cape over his armor said coldly, this so-called protection is ridiculous and self-righteous. They have the potential for extraordinary abilities, but coddling them like this will only limit their growth. We've discussed this, Magneto. They still need to learn, the woman retorted, unwilling to back down. Magneto gave a cold smile but didn't argue further. All right, this isn't the time for bickering, said a dark-skinned woman with short white hair. Regardless of the motive behind the coordinate signal, we need to work together. Turning to the blue-skinned woman beside him, Magneto said, Raven, it's your turn. Raven, also known as Mystique, smiled sweetly. Her blue skin shifted, and a new form emerged. She had transformed into an exact replica of Wolverine, right down to the rugged face. She was ready to infiltrate the dam base alone when suddenly, an old voice echoed in everyone's minds, "Jean, Eric, Logan, come in." 10 minutes later, inside the base, the X-Men and Magneto stood staring in confusion at a group of little children and a man with red quartz glasses, who looked just as baffled as they were. Magneto, Eric, glanced at Professor X, who wore a gentle smile. "So, what exactly happened, Charles?" Eric asked politely, though clearly perplexed. Where was the promised battle? He had been preparing to use his old friends in a carefully staged plan, but now it seemed like it had all been for nothing. "I believe there's never a shortage of justice in this world, Eric," the professor replied softly, his eyes gleaming. Chapter 6 Chapter 29 to Chapter 33 After a long standoff at the base, Magneto, Eric, didn't get the answers he was seeking. His carefully laid plans were completely ruined, which left the militant mutant leader furious. In the end, he chose to leave, but not before venting his frustration. Everything valuable had either been destroyed or taken away. As Magneto stormed off, he left behind a bitter parting remark. Meanwhile, Wolverine, Logan, wandered into a laboratory filled with familiar equipment. The sight of it stirred fragments of long-lost memories, though they were disjointed and unclear. The headache that followed made it impossible for him to piece it all together, leaving him frustrated. Later, Professor X and the others returned to the fighter jet. The younger generation were thrilled to see the professor and Scott safe. Finally, the X-Men received an explanation from Professor X. A mysterious group had raided Stryker's test base. While the professor didn't know the full details of the battle, Logan, with his experience as a seasoned warrior, could tell from the state of the base that the attack had been a swift and brutal blitzkrieg. Stryker and his forces had been wiped out in less than 5 minutes, unable to even put up a fight. All surveillance data had been deleted, and anything of value had been meticulously stripped from the base. This level of power and precision immediately raised alarm bells for Logan and the others. In the resting cabin of the fighter jet, Storm, Aurora, turned to Scott and asked, "You had brief contact with them. Do you have anything to say, Scott?" Scott sighed and replied, "They gave me the impression that they were very young, probably in their late teens or early 20s, but extremely powerful." He spoke helplessly, adding extra emphasis on how powerful they were. He could barely recall anything else, having been drugged and hypnotized. Just as he was about to fight back, an enraged girl knocked him out with a single wave of her hand. The memory bruised his pride. Being knocked unconscious by a girl was a blow he found hard to bear. Aurora nodded thoughtfully. Stryker is a military colonel who commands a specialized task force, his personal unit. Fully armed and stationed at the base, they were massacred in mere minutes. The level of skill and power needed to achieve that is something only a handful in the world could possess. Jean shook her head in disbelief. Stryker himself might not have been incredibly strong, but he had soldiers, weapons, and influence. He had managed to control both Professor X and Scott through his schemes and even launched a successful raid on the school. That alone demonstrated his capability. Yet, despite all of this, he and his forces were taken down so easily. The group responsible for that must have been incredibly powerful. Everyone was discussing the situation, but none of them noticed the intrigued expressions on the faces of the younger team members. Especially John, also known as Pyro. His eyes were filled with excitement. A group of young people had accomplished such a daring and decisive feat, and that was exactly the kind of life he longed for. If he could, he would join them in a heartbeat. Meanwhile, the X-Men continued to analyze the situation. Beast, with his muscular frame and blue fur, rubbed his head thoughtfully. Stryker was a military colonel, and now that he's dead, we're going to have a serious problem. As a former diplomat, Beast understood the hostility American society had toward mutants, especially from the government. Stryker's use of Nightcrawler to assassinate the president had already strained relations to the breaking point. Now, with Stryker's death, the tension between mutants and the government was bound to escalate even further. Logan and the other X-Men quickly realized the gravity of the situation. Their expressions grew somber as they considered the worsening environment for mutants in the days to come. Professor X shook his head slightly. "Perhaps the situation isn't as dire as we think, Hank." Beast, puzzled, asked, "Why do you say that?" The professor smiled mysteriously. "Those mysterious individuals might surprise us." In his mind, through the memories of the rescued children, Professor X had already glimpsed scenes from the base. He had witnessed the communication and expressions of those remarkable young people. He admired the strategic thinking of the one who seemed to be their leader. The deleted data and erased surveillance footage gave him a strong hunch. He already had a guess about who they were. Now, he looked forward to the day when he could have a face-to-face conversation with that young man. Yes, there was something a bit sinister about him, but how could he not feel a bit grateful to the one who saved both him and his students? In a secluded rental cabin deep in the Canadian wilderness, snow was falling heavily outside. But inside, the warmth from the fireplace made the atmosphere cozy and inviting. 2 pickup trucks were parked outside the wooden house, their tires covered in fresh snow. Inside, Natasha and Wanda were setting dinner plates and placing cappuccinos on the table, while the others eagerly prepared for dinner. This time of day always brought a sense of joy and comfort, especially when they all came together to cook. The little girl, Clarice, had just finished washing up and changed into the clothes they had bought for her on the way. She looked refreshed and ready to join the group for dinner. After tying her messy hair with a rubber band, the once dirty little girl now looked clean and beautiful. She sat quietly on the sofa, sipping hot milk in small, careful sips. Leon and Natasha stood by the window, meticulously going over their haul from the base. In truth, the loot wasn't extensive. The base was primarily a testing facility, lacking any valuable military hardware. The real prize was the adamantium, an incredibly valuable material coveted by many. However, Leon had no plans to sell it. Quality resources like that were meant for his own people. Beyond that, they'd also retrieved years of Stryker's research and test data, as well as some advanced military technology. The mutant experimentation data would be highly sought after by certain groups, like Hydra, and could easily fetch hundreds of millions. But Leon had no intention of selling it. Morally, he couldn't justify it. Even if he did, it would likely lead to his family alienating him. The true valuable gain lay in the US military technology. They had obtained advanced drone designs and heavy transport aircraft technology. Natasha mentioned that selling these to agents of the black market of various countries could bring in an enormous profit. As for whether Leon dared to sell such sensitive tech, that didn't seem to concern him. There was very little he was afraid of. What price do you think they'll offer? Leon asked, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Natasha shrugged with a smirk. Congratulations on becoming a billionaire, I guess. It has to be acknowledged that the United States leads the world in both technology and military advancements, especially in the development of cutting-edge military equipment like drones and transport aircraft. This highlights the immense value of technical blueprints for such equipment. With these schematics, even nations with moderate resources can potentially replicate or understand the technology, gaining access to crucial innovations. These blueprints contain core technologies, and once fully understood, they can close the gap between nations and the US in terms of military capability. As a result, the US keeps an extremely tight lid on its technology. Any potential leaks are met with swift action, involving intelligence agencies or even the military. Those responsible for such betrayals face severe consequences, often labeled as treason. The US will never allow another country to rival its dominance in technological and military fields, which is why these secrets are so valuable. Natasha wasn't exaggerating when she mentioned the value of such information. In fact, she may have even understated it. Leon understood this perfectly. He glanced at Natasha, and she caught his meaning. She shrugged, if you want to sell, I can definitely make it happen. But for security, I'll need some help. Who do you have in mind? Leon asked. Wanda and Pietro. Wanda's abilities can read and even rewrite memories, which will help us maintain the utmost confidentiality. They will be contributing to this trip of yours. Then, Leon nodded, confident in Natasha's expertise. As for the unique properties of adamantium, it's incredibly dense, offering both extreme hardness and penetrative power. While it may not be ideal for weaponry, its true value lies in its replicability. Thanks to Natasha's download of the formula onto a USB drive, they now had access to it. In simple terms, they'd never run out of adamantium, and if they needed quick cash, they could sell it to the highest bidders. This trip had been highly rewarding, and Leon was in a great mood. After the mission, he felt so good that he helped himself to a few extra bowls during the meal. The group had gained 2 new members, Yuriko and Clarice. With Wanda present, there was no doubt about Yuriko's loyalty, but a conversation with the young girl, Clarice, revealed a surprise that thrilled Leon even more. Clarice's ability was teleportation. She possessed an energy that could distort space and create teleportation portals. After connecting the dots between her name and her ability, Leon realized who she was: future Blink. This revelation made him incredibly happy. Blink's powers were formidable. Though Leon only knew a little about her, he remembered that when fully developed, her abilities could allow her to teleport across vast distances, even between Earth and the Moon. Even if her combat power wasn't the highest, her support abilities were invaluable. Leon's heart softened towards the girl, and during the meal, he kept serving her vegetables, a gesture that made Clarice both happy and moved. She had been an orphan all her life and had never experienced such warmth and kindness. During dinner, Leon asked Wanda and Pietro to help Natasha sell the technical blueprints and make some money. Without hesitation, they agreed. Though the outside world was filled with chaos, inside the cozy wooden cabin, there was a sense of warmth and harmony. The group spent the night together, safe from the wind and snow. The next day, Leon and the group were preparing to return to the Ural Mountains. Of course, the young girl, Clarice, had been provided with a fake passport and identity, ensuring that boarding the plane wouldn't be an issue. As they waited at the Canadian airport, something strange happened. The people walking around suddenly froze in place. It was as if time itself had stopped. Leon, sitting calmly in a chair, didn't panic. He immediately noticed the old man in a wheelchair in front of him. Glancing around, H. realized that this was no ordinary occurrence. The man had used his psychic abilities to construct an illusory world for this conversation. However, this wasn't an invasion of his mind. Leon, who had mastered both hockey and advanced breathing techniques, was highly attuned to even the slightest disruptions. If he wanted to, he could easily break free from this illusion. Nice to meet you, Mr. Leon. Please forgive me for using this method, said the old man. Leon wasn't surprised that the man knew his name. After all, Sergei had mentioned it back at the base. What did surprise him was how quickly the man had found him within less than a day. Professor X, Leon acknowledged with a slight nod, his tone cool. The professor, unfazed by Leon's attitude, smiled gently. Thank you very much for your help in saving me and those innocent children. I accept your thanks, Leon replied, cutting to the point without wasting time. He met the old man's gaze directly and continued, saving you was incidental. Our real goal was to eliminate that trash and rescue those people. But given the value of the information on this USB drive, I'd like to propose a deal. The professor's expression remained calm. Please, tell me your conditions, Mr. Leon. I need your help to build a stealth aircraft, Leon stated bluntly. One that can evade radar and military satellites so I can travel the world without being tracked. Although he had Blink on his side, the girl was still young and her teleportation abilities weren't fully developed yet. He needed something more immediate, a plane capable of avoiding detection. Leon was confident in Beast's inventive skills, and the professor, after a few moments of thought, nodded. It may take some time. Is 1 year enough? Leon asked. Of course, that's sufficient. Good. You can have your people retrieve the USB drive. Thank you very much, the professor replied, his tone warm. If you need anything else, feel free to reach out. We'll do our best to assist. Whoosh. The illusion shattered in an instant, and the world around Leon resumed its normal flow. The crowd at the airport continued bustling as if nothing had happened. Only Sergei and a few others, more attuned to their hockey senses, noticed the subtle shift in Leon's demeanor. Ignoring their questioning glances, Leon turned his head slightly. Not far away, a woman with burgundy hair was watching him. As the boarding announcement echoed through the airport, Leon stood up and motioned for everyone to follow, leaving the woman behind without a second glance. But on his seat, a USB flash drive remained, quietly waiting. The news of Colonel Stryker's death couldn't be kept from the US government for long. While a colonel's rank in the military isn't particularly high, Stryker's influence went beyond his title. As a military scientist with deep connections, his role was significant, especially after the assassination of the US president by a mutant. Stryker had eagerly proposed a plan to counter the mutant threat, and although the government had likely been aware of his raid on the mutant academy, they turned a blind eye. However, Stryker's sudden death drew immediate suspicion toward the mutant community. His demise sparked major concern in the US government, likened in gravity to the president's assassination. Some high-ranking officials and members of Congress believed this marked an all-out war declaration from mutants against the United States. While the government was debating a possible widespread purge of mutants, a bombshell report surfaced, igniting the internet and public opinion. This document detailed Stryker's inhumane experiments on mutants over the past decade, including shocking and gruesome videos that were beyond comprehension. The world reacted with outrage. These experiments transcended politics and global power struggles. No one cared about Stryker's status as a US military figure. His actions violated basic human decency, and the global community was united in its condemnation. Stryker's atrocities caused an international uproar. Within 24 hours, social media was flooded with furious posts. The backlash was so intense that some servers crashed due to the volume of activity. Major news outlets hastily added special reports, unleashing criticism on Stryker, the military, and the government. This media frenzy was a goldmine for ratings, and news networks were unafraid of any future government reprisals. Meanwhile, the federal government and military found themselves in an increasingly untenable position, struggling to contain the damage. From this global scandal, public criticism quickly turned against both the government and military. There had long been an unspoken agreement between the two regarding human experimentation. While they neither openly endorsed it nor opposed it, they were willing to look the other way as long as it remained hidden and provided tangible benefits. But once exposed, they had no choice but to face the consequences. The public, now furious, didn't care whether the government and military were directly involved. They demanded accountability. Under pressure, the White House spokesman made a hasty statement, claiming that Stryker's actions were entirely his own and that the federal government was unaware of them. The military spokesman echoed this, but the damage was already done. Attempts to control public outrage and manage the narrative proved ineffective. The situation had escalated beyond containment, and any efforts to suppress public opinion were futile. In a bid to stabilize the situation, the government and military quickly found scapegoats, forcing several officials to resign to pacify the public. As for any plans targeting the mutant community, they were quietly shelved. Meanwhile, at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters in New York, the academy, which had been left in disarray after Stryker's surprise attack, was restored after some much-needed repairs. We deeply apologize to the world and the mutant community for the Stryker incident. In the principal's office, the X-Men and the professors watched the White House spokesperson's apology on the monitor in front of them. Scott and Logan finally let out a sigh of relief. It seemed the mutant crisis had passed. Even as the media attention would soon fade, the status and treatment of mutants would likely improve. After all, Human nature tends to sympathize with the oppressed. Despite the earlier distrust and disdain for mutants, the exposure of the human experiments would grant them public sympathy and a more favorable environment, at least for a while. It's finally over, Logan muttered, a cigar in his mouth. He twisted his neck, clearly displeased. He was probably the most frustrated among them. He hadn't gotten to kill anyone. Thankfully, Leon's people were well prepared. Otherwise, we might have been targeted and purged, Aurora said, crossing her arms with a relieved expression. All she wanted now was a few days of rest. But who are they? Beast asked, standing beside the desk. From their strength and how careful they were, it's hard to believe they're just a group of young people under 20. The others nodded in agreement. The situation had been resolved so quietly, almost anticlimactically, with a potentially fierce battle being avoided. Yet they still didn't know who had come to their aid. Professor X listened quietly as the group exchanged thoughts, then turned his attention to Jean, who had remained silent. In his gentle voice, he asked, Jean, you've met Mr. Leon and his group. What do you think of them? The others shifted their focus to Jean, curious about her response. After a brief moment, she thoughtfully replied, the first impression they gave me was one of purity and clarity, but more like being among a pride of lions. A pride of lions? Storm raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Yes, Jean nodded, her voice soft but firm. They're like young lions, and Leon is undoubtedly their lion king. When he and I locked eyes, it was something I'll never forget. His gaze, it wasn't just looking at me, it felt like he was seeing through me, straight into my soul. Scott scratched his chin, puzzled by Jean's description. That's a strange way to put it. Professor X, however, seemed to understand. Jean's right. Leon leads these young lions with purpose. They're strong and kind, with a shared goal. Though their pasts may be unknown, they are not our enemies. In fact, they might become our allies. Friends whose origins are unclear still warrant some caution, Storm pointed out. True, Professor X agreed. But for now, they've saved us and helped avert a crisis. That's worth remembering. That much is good, Beast Hank chimed in, nodding. Then, with a wry smile, he added, though we still owe them a plane. Are you sending me any help with that, Professor? Chuckling, Professor X replied, that part's on you, Hank. Luckily, I had already started work on building new aircraft. It's just a bit of extra trouble now, Hank sighed. I do wonder how they were so certain we'd be able to replace that plane so easily. Of course I'm sure. That guy is a beast when it comes to inventions, Leon said confidently, lounging on the sofa in the wooden villa. Pietro raised an eyebrow. You know the fighter jet you're talking about has vertical lift tech, an optical engine, radar shielding, and space penetration capabilities, right? Even the United States can't develop something like that. It does sound like an impressive fighter, but can a mutant really invent something like that? Pietro added skeptically. Sergei, wearing a blue sweater and carrying a glass of water, sauntered over with a smirk. Oh, Pietro, are you doubting Boss Leon? His tone was teasing, but Pietro's stomach dropped as he glanced at Leon, who was now giving him a half smile, the kind that said, are you questioning me? Quickly backtracking, Pietro stammered, no way. I would never doubt Boss Leon. I was just asking. Don't try to stir things up between us. He pointed accusingly at Sergei and the other guys snickering on the sofa, clearly annoyed. Brother Pietro seems like such a suck-up, Alina remarked casually, hugging the little sable as she sat watching TV with her sisters. Her words hit Pietro like an arrow straight to the heart. Ah, Pietro dramatically clutched his chest, his eyes wide with disbelief. A suck-up, really? In his mind, he was just being smart. If he didn't sweet-talk Leon, he knew what would happen: intense, doubled training sessions, or worse, getting righteously beaten in sparring. He was merely a man trying to survive. Why was the world so harsh? Pietro's inner thoughts were a whirlwind of despair. Why me? Why is life so difficult? Alina's innocent expression only made it worse, leaving Pietro even more exasperated and speechless. Haha, looks like Alina really got you, Pietro, Sergei laughed, shaking his head. Hey man, my advice. Take a breather outside before you blow a fuse, one of the others teased. Pietro slumped on the sofa with the exaggerated air of someone abandoned by the world, exiling himself from the group. But that didn't stop Sergei and the others from laughing and continuing to poke fun at him. It was clear they were all more than happy to keep teasing him. The atmosphere in the wooden villa was warm and inviting. Clarice, sitting with Alina and her sisters watching TV, finally felt her worries ease. Following Leon to this unknown place had been the biggest gamble of her life, but it seemed she had made the right choice. Leon's brothers and sisters were all good people, and she felt at home here. As she stole a glance at Leon, he noticed and returned her look with a gentle smile. It made Clarice flustered, caught off guard by his kindness. Leon smiled softly, then stood up and stepped outside. As expected, Eureka was there, standing by the door in a sweater, holding a glass of cold water, staring at the heavy snowfall. Her eyes were distant, filled with confusion. She turned when she heard the creak of Leon's footsteps on the wooden floor. Leon joined her and broke the silence, feeling a bit out of place. Eureka nodded, answering honestly, it's warm here, and nice, but I always feel like I don't belong. She paused, her eyes reflecting the painful memories she had. All she remembered were the brutal scenes of being controlled by Stryker, leaving her feeling like a lost, homeless beast who had suddenly stumbled into a warm home. It was unsettling. Leon understood the feeling well. It was like Yuriko was a veteran suffering from post-war stress, unable to adapt to normal life after years on the battlefield. But Leon wasn't worried. He knew she would eventually find her place here. Yuriko couldn't blend into an ordinary family. But were they really ordinary people? Do you trust me? Leon asked, his approach to Yuriko simple and direct, unlike how he handled others. Yuriko looked directly at him. After a few seconds of locking eyes with Leon, whose gaze was clear yet carried a quiet authority, she instinctively lowered her head and nodded. I trust you because I can sense how you truly feel about me. Good, Leon said, patting her on the shoulder. Time will prove your choice right. We won't restrict you. Just open your heart and be ready for the future. He smiled lightly before adding, besides, I don't think you'll have much time to worry about fitting in. You're a natural-born warrior. What he really meant was that she just needed proper training. Once they started, Yuriko wouldn't have much time to think about anything else. And given her exceptional healing ability, the intensity of the training he had planned for her would far exceed what others could handle. Yuriko felt a little confused but suddenly shivered, unsure why. Maybe it was just the cold, she thought, glancing at the sweater she wore. Roar, roar. Just then, two loud roars echoed from a distance. Instinctively, Yuriko's eyes widened as she went on full alert. Like a predator, ready to pounce, she stared into the dark jungle, prepared for any attack. Bang! In the next moment, to Yuriko's shock, two swift figures cut through the night like bolts of lightning, appearing right in front of the wooden house. A powerful gust of wind followed, scattering snow in all directions. In the light from the doorway, the figures of Wanda and Natasha became clear. They're so fast, Yuriko thought, stunned. She could clearly see their faces now, and though she lowered her guard, the surprise lingered. The roars she heard earlier were they just the sound of their movements? Back at the base, Leon had kicked her to the ground, but she'd never seen anyone else in action. She hadn't fully grasped the fighting strength of Wanda and the others, but their explosive speed screamed danger. Hey, good evening, two beautiful ladies, Leon greeted casually, waving at them. Natasha and Wanda ascended the steps side by side. Congrats again, Leon, Natasha smirked, you're about to become a billionaire just like I said. In my own special way, I've contacted members of an organization, met with their leader, and we've reached an agreement to cooperate, Natasha said, sitting on the sofa in the wooden villa, sipping her tea. Leon, sitting nearby, nodded for her to continue. The two designs are priced at $1.5 billion each. If the deal goes through, you'll be a billionaire, Natasha teased, playfully patting Leon on the shoulder. I'll need some pocket money for cosmetics and new clothes. Leon rolled his eyes. This is our money. You handle it. Even though he was on the verge of earning $3 billion, Leon wasn't overly excited. There were plenty of ways for him to make money, and he wasn't particularly tempted. But the others, well, that was a different story. Immediately, a chorus of excitement erupted. Wow, Boss Leon, we're gonna be rich. I want to buy game consoles, gear, and a new computer. I want new headphones. I need new clothes. The old ones are starting to feel too small. Sergey, Pietro, and the others eagerly raised their hands, voicing their desires. In the past, Leon had taken good care of everyone when he had money. No one lacked electronics, clothes, or essentials. Still, it was never quite enough, as the family's needs were vast. Everyone was considerate, avoiding excessive spending. But now, with $3 billion on the horizon, things were different. Such an enormous amount instantly sparked everyone's shopping dreams. Even the three little ones, Alina and her friends, excitedly asked for more snacks. They weren't too interested in toys, but they were eager for treats. As a large group gathered around Leon, eyes shining with excitement, he deflected, saying, "Don't look at me. Natasha is OU financial officer now. All expenses have to be approved by her. I suggest you ask her nicely." Pietro, quick to react, used his super speed to grab ice cream and other treats from the fridge and placed them in front of Natasha in an instant. He then zipped behind her, gently massaging her shoulders like a loyal servant. In a flattering tone, he said, "Oh, beautiful and generous Ms. Natasha, your beauty rivals that of Venus, and your kindness matches Prometheus. Surely, you won't refuse the humble request of your most loyal Pietro." The rest of the group crowded around Natasha, showering her with attention, massaging her legs, rubbing her arms. Even Alina and the little ones joined in, dragging Clarice along. They all piled onto Natasha's lap, their little faces flushed and wide-eyed, looking up at her expectantly like eager puppies. Even Wanda found herself squeezed out, which made her immediately annoyed. "Hey, Pietro, I've never seen you treat me this well," she said, crossing her arms. "Ha, Wanda, trust me right now, Natasha is family," Pietro shot back, not even turning around as he delivered his playful jab. Wanda fumed, nearly tempted to use her chaos magic on him. Leon, meanwhile, slapped his leg and burst into laughter. Natasha, fully aware of the game, maintained her composure, playing the role of a supreme, elegant goddess. She leaned back, enjoying the attention with a regal air. All right, Pietro. A little more on my shoulder, please, she instructed calmly. Yes, and don't forget the left arm. By the way, the ice cream's great. As Alina fed her spoonfuls of ice cream, Natasha continued to direct her loyal minions with poise. Pietro, ever the flatterer, cooed, beautiful Ms. Natasha, how are our skills? Very impressive, Natasha responded, clearly pleased with his groveling. Let me know what you want to buy in the future. Pietro let out a joyful, woo, and zipped away, reappearing moments later with pen and paper, ready to start drafting his shopping list. Pietro let out a joyful, woo, and zipped away, reappearing moments later with pen and paper, eager to start drafting his shopping list. Seeing this, the others began chattering excitedly and followed suit. Natasha responded to each of them patiently, and soon, everyone was buzzing with energy, heading off to make their own lists just like Pietro. Watching the lively crowd retreat noisily to the second floor, Leon smiled and shook his head. This bunch, as expected, they were still young and easily swayed by Natasha. Now that she had control of the finances, he knew she'd make them work for every penny. Yuriko, sitting nearby on the sofa, observed the scene. Her eyes softened, seeing the camaraderie. Is this what a family feels like? She found herself wondering why she had the sudden urge to belong. With everyone else upstairs, only Leon, Natasha, Wanda, and Yuriko remained on the first floor. Natasha's playful demeanor shifted, her expression growing serious. Although our mission went smoothly, I noticed something odd, she began. It seemed like someone was tracking us, or maybe just me. Could it be Dreykov's men? Leon asked, frowning. Since Natasha joined them a year ago, she had rarely gone out. If Dreykov's people were still after her, it was strange they would target her so quickly. Had they never stopped looking? I'm not sure, Natasha admitted, but it feels like there are two different groups following us. Two groups? Leon echoed, his frown deepening. Two groups? Leon echoed, his frown deepening. Yes, Natasha confirmed. One might be Dreykov's men, but the other group is much more elusive and patient. Wanda and I noticed them several times, but every time we tried to track them, they vanished almost instantly. It's rare to encounter such skill. Natasha nodded, her tone serious. Over the past year, she had grown far stronger. Trained and conditioned from a young age, her physical fitness had always been exceptional. Now, with the addition of the rhythmic breathing technique that quickly strengthened her body, combined with her mastery of two forms of hockey, her skills were even sharper. While she hadn't reached full concentration, her perception was still top-notch, especially with Wanda by her side. Wanda, using her heightened senses and ability to detect auras, was able to pinpoint subtle movements with remarkable precision. For their stalkers to evade both of them suggested they were dealing with a highly skilled adversary. It's interesting, Leon mused. Could they be Hydra? He thought for a moment, then shook his head. No matter who they are, they'll slip up eventually. But we should move our plans forward. We need to track down Dreykov, eliminate him, make it look like an accident, and take control of his hidden assets. Dreykov was no small player. He controlled vast resources, including the infamous Red Room, which trained a large network of spies. However, he was also under the watchful eye of S.H.I.E.L.D. Even if Leon didn't act, S.H.I.E.L.D. might find an opportunity to eliminate him. Dreykov's overt assets were too risky to touch, but his hidden resources, those could be fair game, and Natasha understood this perfectly. When Dreykov's name was mentioned, a cold glint flashed in Natasha's eyes. This man had been the source of her greatest suffering, forcing her into hiding for years because of his power. But now, she no longer feared him. I won't get involved directly, Leon said. You all can handle it. Have Wanda control Dreykov to transfer the assets useful to us, and sell off the ones we don't need. Avoid touching anything too obvious, it'll draw attention. Got it, I'll make a plan, Natasha replied without hesitation. With Natasha and Wanda on board, Leon felt a sense of relief. He trusted them completely. As for himself, he knew he needed time to regroup and recover after the recent events. The sun shone brightly over Brazil, its rays illuminating everything in their path. In front of a luxurious hotel, a sleek Rolls-Royce pulled up. As the doorman respectfully opened the door, a Russian man in a sharp suit stepped out, flanked by several muscular bodyguards. The group made their way into the Grand Hotel, taking the elevator directly to the restaurant. At a table near the floor-to-ceiling window, someone was already waiting, a man wearing glasses, with 3 bodyguards standing behind him. Seeing the Russian approach, the man with glasses stood up and extended his hand. Mr. Dreykov, a pleasure to meet you, he said. Likewise, Mr. Walker. I believe we'll find our partnership beneficial, Dreykov replied. The bodyguards on both sides kept a discreet distance, far enough to give privacy, but close enough to act if needed. Dreykov and Walker sat at the table, sipping wine and enjoying the chef's gourmet dishes while they discussed their business. Hours passed, and by the end of their meal, both men stood and shook hands, sealing the deal. Dreykov left with a satisfied smile. It had been a successful negotiation, and Dreykov was in a good mood. He decided to extend his stay in Brazil, booking a presidential suite in the luxurious hotel. After washing up, he donned a white bathrobe, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out over the city and the distant coastline. The view was breathtaking. Everything seemed perfect. But as he admired the beauty of the city, a dark thought crossed his mind, clouding his mood. A face appeared in his memory, the ace spy he had personally trained, the one who had betrayed him. Natasha, he muttered under his breath, his expression turning grim. Her defection had taught him a bitter lesson. When a tool becomes self-aware, it can no longer be controlled. If there's one, a second will inevitably follow. This was something Dreykov could not tolerate. To him, those spies were his property assets that had no right to develop self-awareness. But he had found a solution: pheromones. A compound designed to control his spies, ensuring they would submit completely to his will. Still, Natasha's mysterious disappearance left a sour taste in his mouth. As the head of the Red Room, he knew just how deadly the spies he trained could be. If she ever sought revenge, it would mean living in constant fear. "I'll find you, Natasha," he growled, downing his whiskey in one gulp. His tone was venomous, but before he could relish his anger, a familiar voice, rough and cold, cut through the air. "I don't think you need to find me, Dreykov. I'm right here." It was like being struck by lightning. Dreykov's entire body froze, a surge of terror swelling inside him. He couldn't believe it. Though he hadn't yet turned around, he could feel the presence behind him, something dangerous, a predator lurking just out of sight. With stiff movements, Dreykov slowly turned and saw two women standing behind him. One of the women was Natasha, dressed in a striking red leather jacket. The other was a young woman in a gray sweater, unfamiliar to Dreykov. A year had passed since he'd last seen Natasha, and to his surprise, she seemed different. The strongest spy he had ever commanded appeared to be thriving, and her demeanor had shifted. She used to be cold, a tool devoid of emotion. Now, there was something else, something more human about her. Natasha smirked, a glint of danger in her striking green eyes. "Miss me, boss." Dreykov, ever the cunning old fox, discreetly glanced at the closed door behind them. His hand, hidden in his pocket, kept pressing the alarm, but no one came. This told him everything. The bodyguard, outside, and even the secret sentries he had placed, had been dealt with. His heart sank. Taking a steady breath, he feigned calm and said in a deep voice, "Natasha, it's been a while. Your defection made me sad for quite some time." "Sad?" Natasha tilted her head, tearing through Dreykov's mask of hypocrisy. "I think you were more angry enough to want to tear me to pieces." "How could I be?" Dreykov's expression didn't falter. "You were the best spy I ever trained." Natasha's eyes narrowed, her voice icy and unrelenting. "The veil hides your ugliness, Dreykov, and it makes me sick. You've caused countless tragedies, destroyed so many families." Her words cut deeper as her tone grew colder. "You should pay the price for that. You know, Natasha, even if you kill me, nothing will change. You'll face even more relentless revenge and pursuit," Dreykov said, his voice trembling as the reality of his impending death sank in. His back was drenched in sweat. He couldn't fathom how much Natasha had changed in the years she'd been gone. Natasha sneered. "Your wealth, your empire, it will all be ruined. And I'll make sure you die after seeing it crumble." Her eyes glinted with cold amusement. "And if you're still counting on your bodyguards," bang. The door behind Dreykov flew open, revealing Sergei, towering and formidable. In one hand, he held two unconscious women in tight combat suits, and in the other, he effortlessly carried another. With a casual motion, he threw them to the ground. Dreykov's hope drained as he looked at the unconscious black widows at his feet. His desperation deepened. At a subtle signal from Natasha, Wanda's eyes glowed red. The swirling red energy of her chaos magic enveloped Dreykov. His eyes turned crimson, and the fear and despair in his expression were quickly replaced with a vacant, dull stare. In an underground base nestled in the Eastern European mountains, Dreykov stood on a steel platform, looking down at the rows of women clad in tight combat uniforms. His eyes were filled with despair as he gazed at them. Each woman's expression was empty, cold, and ruthless like soulless machines. "No, no, no. They're all my assets, you devils," Dreykov muttered, remembering the horrifying actions he had been forced to take under mind control. He had personally transferred his vast fortune assets hidden in gray areas into secret accounts prepared by Natasha. Some of his less valuable holdings had even been sold off. While his visible wealth remained untouched, it was these hidden, illicit assets that he relied on. The Black Widows he had trained were his foundation, the key to building his empire quickly. His grand plan to manipulate the world economy had only just begun, and now it was slipping from his grasp. This blow was worse than death for Dreykov. "They're just a bunch of tragic souls, Dreykov. People like you are destined for hell," Natasha whispered coldly, standing beside him. "You'll use your own fortune to free them, and all the wealth you stole from them will be used for charity, to help them find their families." She leaned in, her voice even softer. "Your end will come in a dark, lonely alley, and you'll witness it all helplessly until your final breath." Dreykov's face contorted with rage. "You think you've won, Natasha? You have no idea what you're dealing with. These women are more than just assets, they're my legacy." Natasha's eyes narrowed. Your legacy is one of pain and suffering. It ends today. You can't undo years of conditioning, Dreykov spat. They'll never be normal again. Maybe not, Natasha conceded, her voice steady. But they'll have a chance at freedom. Something you never gave them. Killing Dreykov would have been easy, but Natasha wasn't interested in simple vengeance. She wanted him to suffer, to feel the weight of his sins. The women he exploited, the Black Widows, would be freed. They would be reunited with their families and given a chance at a normal life. This was the only justice Natasha could offer them. With a nod, she signaled Wanda. Wanda stepped forward, her hand glowing with the power of chaos magic. She reached out, and her magic seeped into Dreykov's mind, rewriting his will. What are you doing to me? Dreykov screamed, his eyes wide with terror. Wanda's voice was calm but firm. Ensuring you can never hurt anyone again. From that moment on, he would become a puppet, acting only to carry out the liberation of the Black Widows. As Natasha promised, once his task was done, Dreykov would meet his end in obscurity. Inside, Dreykov screamed, his soul trapped, furious and desperate. But no one could hear him. All he could do was watch his underground empire collapse and vanish before his eyes. Natasha and Wanda walked out of the base, side by side. Outside, Sergei, wearing a vest that revealed his muscular frame, leaned against the front of a Hummer, arms crossed, waiting for them. Is it done? Sergei asked, his voice gruff but tinged with concern. Natasha nodded. It's over. Dreykov's reign of terror ends today. The three of them climbed into the Hummer and gazed at the bright sun in the sky. Natasha, sitting in the back seat, let out a long sigh of relief. A weight had finally been lifted. Finally resolved, she said softly. Now I can get back to training. In the driver's seat, Sergei stretched, then started the engine. Natasha smiled as she glanced at the USB drive in her hand, while Wanda, sitting in the passenger seat, looked back through the rearview mirror with curiosity. Sister Natasha, how much did you make from selling Dreykov's gray assets? Wanda asked. The true value isn't just in money, Natasha replied with a knowing smile. Not money. Wanda raised an eyebrow. Yes, Dreykov had bigger ambitions than I expected. He was trying to build an aerial fortress, and I found the technical blueprints for it. Let's go. This is going to be quite the surprise for Leon. Wanda's curiosity grew as Natasha's mysterious smile widened. The data from Dreykov's database had revealed an unexpected twist, and Natasha knew Leon would be shocked by what they'd uncovered. As they drove, Sergei broke the silence. An aerial fortress. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. Natasha chuckled. Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction, Sergei. Dreykov was always thinking big. But is it even possible? Wanda asked, her voice filled with wonder. With the right resources and technology, anything's possible, Natasha replied. And now we have both. Meanwhile, on the edge of a cliff by a waterfall, Leon sat on a rock, staring at the screen of his tablet. His eyes gleamed as he scrolled through the information. Natasha had sent the content of the USB drive to him before she even arrived. What a big surprise, he muttered to himself, intrigued by what he saw. The Sky Fortress, if we can build this, we'll have a mobile base camp that can disappear at any time, Leon said, scrolling through the technical drawings and detailed information. The technology was mature and ready for construction. As the Hummer pulled up, Leon looked up from his tablet. Natasha approached, a hint of excitement in her usually composed demeanor. I see you've already started digging into the data, Natasha said, nodding at the tablet. Leon stood, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. Natasha, this is incredible. Do you realize what we could do with this technology? I have some ideas, Natasha replied with a smirk. But I'm sure you've thought of even more. This revelation caught Leon off guard, but Natasha tempered his excitement. Even with the blueprints, it will take several years to complete, even if Dreykov had the manpower to build it. We've got time, Leon shrugged. Natasha smiled, knowing Leon's determination. I'll make sure to invest part of the base's funds each year for the fortress. Especially since we've got Dreykov's money now, Leon added with a grin. He hadn't just broken even, he'd made a considerable profit. After a moment of thought, he added, we should also keep in touch with the people at the base. We might need them down the road. Understood, Natasha replied with a nod,